Hello and welcome to the Middle School Bookmarker Show. My name is Chris.
And I'm Joellen. We're teachers reading the middle school novel Seedfolks by Paul Fleischman.
Today we're covering chapters 11 and 12, that is Maricela and Amir. If you haven't read those chapters yet, go back and do that now, and then come back and listen to our conversation about them.
Oh, and by the way, we're going to get this whole show wrapped up in just 11 minutes because 11 minutes is all you need to.
Watch your third grade teacher chase down a litter bug and scold an adult like a child, which was probably pretty cool to see, especially since Maricela probably remembered being yelled at by that third grade teacher maybe a decade before. And speaking of Maricela, she is the first character that we bump into, and there's a lot that goes on in these two chapters, so we're going to try to get through it all. So we meet Maricela, and she's pretty angry. She begins the chapter by listing reasons she feels like an outsider. She's felt alienation from other Hispanic cultures. She feels like as a teenager that the world hates her, which a lot of teenagers feel that way. She's also pregnant at 16 years old, which definitely is a unique situation and one that she definitely probably feels different than most other kids because of.
Absolutely. And pregnant she really is. Late in the pregnancy. She hates the weight that she's put on. She doesn't like the way she looks. She's also pretty bad about not being asked to go to any parties with friends. She's really mad and angry. Yep.
And the anger continues because she's dropped out of school and she's in this bad situation now. She signs up for this GED program, and a GED is something you would get if you dropped out of school, but you want to get something like a high school diploma. So she's in this program, and it's lands her in the Gibb Street Garden, which is probably not something that she was expecting. The program she ended up in is one that is meant for pregnant teens specifically.
Yeah. And she meets Penny, who runs the GED program. Excuse me. And Penny thought that taking care of the garden would be a great preparation for the girls having a baby.
None of the girls are really thrilled about being there. They end up planting radishes first, which none of the girls even really like to eat. And funny enough, they get eaten by a gopher immediately. The girls don't really care that much. Nobody really likes radishes.
No, not at all. And we can tell from Maricela's tone that again she's very, very angry. We don't blame her, of course. She's in a very tough situation. She feels alone. She's mad about having a baby. She even gets mad at Penny just for being cheerful. So she's really, really angry.
One day, another girl that's in the program, she snaps a piece of her nail off and she has a meltdown. She's screaming, she's cursing, and suddenly Maricela's third grade teacher, Mrs. Fleck, appears.
And Mrs. Fleck, who was also Virgil's teacher from an earlier chapter, if you remember, asks Maricela about having a baby, which continues to annoy Maricela, of course.
And in these two chapters, we see a lot of characters that were in previous chapters. We see Sam's pumpkin partner, who was the Puerto Rican teenager. I don't think he ever got a name, but he's running around. We also see Virgil's dad running through the garden, being inconsiderate, trying to grab that baby lettuce and sell it to restaurants. We also meet Leona, who ends up becoming very important in this chapter. Leona brings some goldenrod flowers, which she was growing, over to Maricela.
Right. She told her she could make some tea to help her feel good. Right. And Maricela feels that she can actually talk to Leona because Leona knows that she wasn't as excited about having a kid as everyone thought she would be. Maricela's felt so isolated and so mad. Now I'm glad, and I'm sure she is, that she's finally found somebody she can talk to, earnestly and honestly.
And they have a really important, really serious, really deep talk one night when there's a power failure. Maricela comments that the whole city shut down, but the garden keeps on going. Nature keeps on going. And that spurs a conversation with Leona and Maricela, where they talk about how nature is this amazing, complicated system. Doesn't run on electricity, it runs on rain and sunlight. Leona also says that Maricela is part of that system. Everything is part of that system in nature.
Yes, and this is an eye opener for Maricela. She starts envisioning nature growing around her. She's seeing things more clearly. She's thinking about how old the world is and how connected all of the dinosaurs and the plants and the air, every molecule has been for millions of years.
And up until this moment, Maricela had been angry and upset about being pregnant and feeling isolated. Leona caps this conversation by saying that it's an honor to be part of this system, and even Maricela's pregnancy, like it's part of the system. And for the first time, Maricela starts to feel okay about having the baby.
She does. And although she didn't feel connected to or understood by her family and her friends around her, that garden grabbed her and made a connection in nature. And it really helped Maricela with her life situation. Another amazing, wonderful thing about gardens and growing. Yeah.
Yeah, this community garden is really turning out to be a huge, major beneficial thing for all these people's lives,
Yeah.
as we will continue to see.
Yeah.
And the next character we bump into is Amir. And Amir describes living in Delhi, India. He talks about how it's actually kind of similar to America in a bunch of ways, specifically that it's so populated in the city areas. But he says America's different because America is like a million crabs living in a million crevices. Americans tend to avoid talking to their neighbors, which is not what Amir is used to. He's used to being in a community where the neighbors are all talking pretty much every day.
Absolutely. And Amir is growing. He's growing lots of vegetables, eggplants and onions and carrots and cauliflowers. The eggplants, especially because of their light purple color as they're starting to grow, really draw the other gardeners' attention. And they're coming over to his gardens, and suddenly he's speaking with some of his neighbors for the very first time. The crabs are coming out of their crevices
Yes.
because of the garden.
Love it. Absolutely love it. He says the garden ends up being an excuse to let the natural friendliness of his neighbors out. The community is forming together in a way that most of these characters have never seen before. They're even becoming friends. And I think the first thing that he describes that shows this is one day some guy comes up and he dumps tires in the garden as if it were still that trashy lot before Kim showed up and planted that first lima bean. But the huge difference here is that when someone dumped those tires and people noticed in the morning, the whole community came together and they had it cleaned. There's no way that would have happened before the garden came together and made everybody feel connected.
And then, not only the trash and getting cleaned up, a purse snatcher comes by, grabs somebody's purse. But Amir and Royce, remember Royce and other people garden from the garden, they chase him down. They do an actual chase. And then they all kind of stop and comment that, wow, we've never done this before. And this garden is making everyone feel like such a part of the community that, this was a natural thing to do, is to look out for one another, to take care of someone.
Amir ends up becoming unlikely friends with a Polish woman, and
Mhm.
they end up walking the same path 7 blocks. That's pretty far. 7 blocks to the garden together. They talk frequently, and they're both planting carrots. Amir notices one day that this woman was hesitating, thinning out her carrots. You got to thin them out. You got to pull a couple out to make sure that the rest of them grow properly and they have enough room. Well, Amir asks this woman about it, and he ends up getting this story about a Nazi concentration camp and how these thinning out the carrots, unfortunately, remind this character that being in a Nazi concentration camp and having the carrots pulled out, it's kind of similar. She feels like it's like when she was in the camp or when she witnessed it, and people had to get separated. Pretty powerful stuff.
Yeah.
He realizes because of this conversation that there's a lot to learn about people. He just assumed carrots. He thought cabbage when he was talking to this woman, and now he sees there's this deep, complex background to her.
And then this leads Amir to befriend Royce. They were afraid of Royce before then, if you remember, and they learned about Royce's living situation, and they learned about other information about him, his background. And a few weeks ago, everybody was pretty intimidated by Royce. But now that they have more information and they know more about him, they're all taking care of him. And he, in turn, helps take care of the garden. He waters them when he can if they're not there. He rakes. He's giving back. And they do say he was not the black teenage boy. He was Royce. He had
They got
got a name, right?
they got to know him, and he became more than the thing that they thought before. He's an actual person with feelings and a background. Fantastic. I think that point's going to come up at the very end of this chapter too. But
Mhm.
first, a roast pig barbecue party. So all of a sudden, there's an impromptu party, there's a violin, they're playing music, they're roasting a pig. All the other gardeners abandon what they are doing and they go eat and party with their neighbors for the first time ever.
Yeah.
Amir says that it's like a harvest festival, and Amir's remember like trading food just like it was in India. People were not necessarily caring about making sure they made a profit, but they're just sharing what they have. They're sharing their harvest.
And you wonder if they knew as little about Indians and his background as he didn't know about Polish people, right? He starts to speak with an older Italian lady, if you remember, who was rude to him last year. I think she said that he didn't give her enough change at the store. And boy, now he's really regretting that. And you know what he said that just makes us all stop and think, boy, we better be careful. Back then, I didn't know it was you.
Yeah, I think it was the lady saying it to him, but it's the same point, and
Oh,
it's the same point that the teenage boy, his name was actually Royce, comment from earlier.
yeah,
Everyone is actually getting to know one another because of the garden, and they're realizing that all these assumptions that they made about each other, they weren't right, and that everybody actually has way more things in common once you get to know each other.
right, right.
Was I wrong? Is it actually
No,
the lady?
no, you're right. I had it all mixed up in my head. You're right. But if you think about it, it goes both ways, doesn't it? It like you just said, it fits each character. That back then I didn't know it was you. Well, they've all been who they have been. They haven't been able to see that, but that garden is letting people see that. So thanks for clarifying for that for me, Chris.
The garden is creating this opportunity for everybody to actually have a reason to talk to one another, and they're finding that they have a lot more in common than they have different. It's
Yeah,
pretty cool.
yes, it
All
is.
right, we're a little over time. Let's make sure we hit like, subscribe, hit that bell, whatever other stuff YouTube throws down there. Next time we are finishing the book. That is chapter 13, Florence, and we're also going to do the bookmarker big questions. We will see you next time.
Bye.